of the preliminary statement of the European Union Election Observation Mission. May I introduce the table to you? We have in the middle our chief observer, Mr. Fabio Massimo Castaldo. Then on the far end we have Andreas Schieder, head of the delegation of the members of the European Parliament, and next to me is our deputy chief observer, Beata Martin Rasomirovic. I open the press conference and hand the floor to our chief observer for his statement.
Thank you very much, dear Everard. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished members of the press, today I will have the honor to present the preliminary statement of the European Union Election Observation to the Republic of Zimbabwe. The findings in this preliminary statement reflect the work of the EU Electoral Observation Mission up to this time. Important parts of the process are still ongoing, and the EU-UM observers are still deployed throughout the 10 provinces to observe also all the remaining steps and stages, including complaints and appeals and the post-electoral environment. And of course, we hope the remaining stages will be devoid of violence. This statement is based on the findings and analysis of the EU Electoral Observation Mission core team, the long-term observers, as well as the short-term observers that have been deployed all across the country. The first EU Electoral Observation Mission observers arrived in Zimbabwe on the 8th of July. On election day, the mission had about 150 observers deployed both in urban and rural areas across Zimbabwe. They represent the 27 EU member states, as well as Canada, Norway, and Switzerland. And I would like to cite this opportunity to express once more my deep gratitude to all of them for the excellent cooperation and their support. Part of the EU-UM on election day was also a delegation from the European Parliament of 7 experienced colleagues led by Mr. Andreas Schieder, who is here beside me, and the diplomats accredited to Zimbabwe. I would also like to thank the observer missions from SADC, from the African Union and COMESA, from Commonwealth, and from the Carter Center for the good cooperation we had so far. The EU-UM was invited by the government of Zimbabwe, and an administrative arrangement was signed between the European Union and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Trade. This agreement stipulates also access to all electoral stakeholders and also the information relevant to the electoral process. Unfortunately, this was not the case with official bodies. This is unprecedented in the history of the EU-UM. As part of this agreement, the EU-UM is committed to provide an independent and impartial long-term analysis of all aspects of the entire electoral process. In the course of its work, the EU-UM conducted over 1,600 meetings with participants on the electoral process in urban and rural areas. The EU-UM adheres to a strict code of conduct, and our observers do not interfere in any way in the electoral process. The EU-UM has assessed the legal framework, the work of the election administration, the political environment, including the campaign of parties and candidates, and we also assessed the participation and role of women, the national minorities, and other marginalized groups. The mission conducted a very comprehensive quantitative and qualitative analysis of the most relevant broadcast and print media, as well as the social media sphere. The legal framework could provide, in fact, an adequate basis to conduct elections in line with regional and international standards exposed by Zimbabwe if implemented properly. However, the EU Election Observation Mission concludes that curtailed rights and a lack of level playing field led to an environment that was not always conducive to voters making a genuine and informed choice in Zimbabwe's 2023 harmonized election. The passing of regressive legal provisions And acts of violence and intimidation resulted ultimately in a climate of fear. The violent arrest around 40 members of ZESN and the ERC on the 23rd of August adds to our grave concerns. Both organizations are respected and are credible human rights defenders and part of the global network of domestic election monitors, GNDEM. They are also exposed by the European Union. Both organizations, I would like to remind these aspects, are accredited citizen observer organization and exercise their constitutional rights. A policy statement on 24th of August said that it was for coordinating the alleged release of election results. Ultimately, the elections fell short of many regional and international standards, including key principles of equality, universality, transparency, and accountability. The election was also hampered by significant issues regarding the independence and the transparency of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, ZEC. The ZEC missed opportunities to increase public trust in the integrity of voting and to result management. The initial failure of ZEC to provide the critical electoral material, notably paper ballots, which resulted in many polling stations opening with severe delays, late into the night or next day, led to an increasingly tense atmosphere in some locations. This was mainly observed in urban centers like Harare or Bulawayo, but also in Manicaland. Overall, the UOM commends, however, the large number of voters who remained in queues for extensive times to exercise their right to vote. ZEC's communication regarding delays, its reason, and the actual voting hours was insufficient. UOM observers assessed the election day as generally calm. Voting was assessed positively. However, I would like to stress on the fact that unauthorized individuals, for example, members of the Forever Associate Zimbabwe, fast-tracked voters at nearly 1/5 of the polling stations we observed, potentially indicating pressure. UOM observers also saw flyers that were falsely informing voters of electoral boycotts by CCC, which may have confused some of them. The UOM noted the central role of the judiciary in the process, given the unprecedented high number of pre-election court challenges pertaining to both right to contest and the validity of the all key legal texts, some of which remain still nowadays unresolved. Many UOM interlocutors conveyed that the trust into the judicial system is low. Although voters were offered the choice of political alternatives, the overall inclusivity of the candidate registration remained limited. Undue registration criteria and ZEC's inconsistent and discretionary implementation had an unreasonably high fee, and ZEC's demand for US dollars cash payments created obstacles to inclusivity. For example, the registration fee for a presidential candidate was $20,000 US, while for National Assembly candidates, the fee was $1,000. 1/5 of all aspiring candidates were rejected. And these numbers, this amount of money, was a 20-fold increase compared to the previous elections. The UOM took also note of a low participation of women candidates. While ZEC's pre-electoral preparations went largely according to schedule, court disputes over candidate registration caused delays in ballot printing and also impacted postal voting. Nevertheless, ZEC promised repeatedly that all systems are go. This was not the case on election day and resulted in a second day of voting. Furthermore, ZEC did not consistently address public concerns related to constituency boundary delimitation, voter registration, candidate registration, as well as ballot security. For instance, the final list of polling stations was only made public on election day. Voter registration was a significant point of contention. ZEC did not publicly disclose details prior to this election of its efforts to verify the accuracy of the voter registration data. Before elections, ZEC did not provide fully analyzable electronic copies of the voters' roll to civil society. The campaign presented voters with a range of viewpoints but there was a lack of a level playing field, particularly regarding the freedom of assembly, which was unduly restricted by arbitrary implementations of the Maintenance of Peace and Order Act, the so-called MPOA. Police used the force to disperse several opposition gatherings, and some instances of intimidation and violence took place, including one killing. The UN's media analysis revealed similar shortcomings. State-controlled media allocated substantially more airtime and print space to the ruling party and President Gandawa and the government. For example, the UN media analysis revealed that state ZBC devoted over 2/3 of its news and current affairs coverage to ZANU-PF, the president and the government. ZBC owned the radio stations, gave the ruling party almost all their election-related airtime. Digital rights are restricted by law, notably online freedom of speech, access to the internet, access to information online, right to privacy and data protection. These resulted in fear and self-censorship by online users. Manipulated election-related content was also circulated widely on social media and traditional media, negatively affecting voters' ability to make informed decisions. The EU election observation missions deplored an extensive and sustained disinformation campaign against the EU, EOM, and other international observer organizations by some media and social media platforms. These unacceptable attempts are to discredit the mission and are seen as a blatant disinformation of the Zimbabwean public. They do reflect a continued effort to undermine the European Union electoral observation mission and credible election observation. The UUM will present a final report with a comprehensive analysis in about 2 months. This report will reflect also the UUM's assessment of the entire electoral process. At the same time, the UUM will make recommendations for future electoral processes, and those recommendations, of course, will be for consideration. I thank all of you for your attention.
Thank you, and I'll pass the floor to Mr. Andreas Schieder, head of the delegation of the European Parliament.
Thank you. As already said, my name is Andreas Schieder, and I'm a member of the European Parliament. It is my pleasure to address you today on behalf of the parliamentary delegation. Before doing so, I also want to express my big thanks for this excellent and good cooperation with the other electoral observers, especially those from the different African organizations. We are 7 members of the European Parliament, representing a large political spectrum and coming even from 6 different countries of the European Union. We have been present during these significant days for Zimbabwe as a part of the European Union election observation mission, and we take note of the late arrival of the invitation to observe these elections. Nevertheless, we are here to perform our work as we do everywhere in the world because our presence was requested by the Zimbabwean authorities. First and foremost, I want to express our full endorsement to the finding presented today by my dear colleague and friend, the Chief Observer, Mr. Fabio Massimo Castaldo. I thank him and all the team for their work and cooperation. During the past few days we have been here, we met with national authorities, candidates, party representatives, religious leaders, civil society organizations, and media representatives. And the Chief Observer already has given throughout an overview of the mission's preliminary findings, and I therefore wish to focus on those issues that we as elected politicians consider as crucial. Let me start by stressing 2 very important points for our delegation. First, there are the crackdown and raids that led to the arrest of 39 people from local observer organizations in this very hotel, which were from SESN and ERC. As subscriber of the Declaration of Principles for Election Observation, we strongly condemn these unacceptable attacks against citizens observers, which are considered by the European Parliament and globally human rights defenders. CESN and is part of the GNDM, the Global Network of Domestic Election Monitors, and it is considered as an independent and credible organization. To make it clear, the European Parliament asked for their release. The second point is the extensive disinformation campaign against international observer organizations, especially the European Union Election Observation Mission. We remind that the EU-EUM was invited by the government to conduct an independent assessment of the electoral process. And as this is said in the preliminary statement, the election fell short of many regional and international standards, including equality, universality and transparency. Besides being largely peaceful, the electoral campaign was severely affected by the Patriotic Act, adopted just last month, and the discussion about the private voluntary organizations bill. According to our interlocutors, these have led to a severe shrinking of democratic space, including for the exercise of freedom of expression, association and assembly, but also to the self-censorship of civil society and the media. In the course of our meetings, we often heard complaints about the lack of transparency of the independence of ZEC, Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. We were also told that it did not provide effective and timely information during the electoral campaign, in particular concerning the voter roll. Moreover, in the past couple of days, our observers noted that the results management processed by ZEC lacked verifiability and traceability. And we regret that ZEC did not receive our delegation, despite several requests from our side, and taking in consideration that the substantial technical and financial contribution the European Union gave to these elections. Equally, several local actors with whom we spoke expressed a serious misgivings concerning the independence of the judiciary regarding the resolution of recent electoral disputes and candidate exclusions. We all agree that democratic competition should always take place on a level playing field and on fairness. No candidate or party should have unequal access to state institutions, resources and media. And we were also reported of misuse of state resources and public office. For example, salary increases for civil servants and support measures for traditional leaders during the electoral campaign. And in addition, we were informed that the state TV broadcaster has been biased in favor of the party in government. An incumbent also benefits from a minimally regulated political finance framework, as it is currently the case in Zimbabwe. Furthermore, the inclusiveness of the process suffered for the 20-fold increase of the registration fees for presidential and parliamentary candidates. We also heard that for the settling of these fees, a payment in US dollars was demanded in most cases, and very often in cash. And information that had previously not been given to those who wanted to register. And this meant that over 1/5 of the candidates were denied registration. We also deplored that women made up less than 50% of all registered candidates. And compared to 2018, where 4 presidential candidates were female, this time only 1 was able to run only through legitimation. We believe that the next government should facilitate improvement on these fronts and on many others. During election day, I cannot start without turning to the election day, I cannot start without stating the obvious. These elections were challenging and difficult. Our delegation split into 3 teams, and one team observed Harare, another Marondera and its surroundings, and another one in Chinchoy. We would like to praise the passion, resilience, and the democratic aspirations of the citizens of Zimbabwe, who spent several hours queuing to cast their vote. In several districts, including the capital Harare, papers for the local elections arrived with unacceptable delay, with the opposition alleging the delays disproportionately affecting their strongholds, as assessed by the mission's statements. The atmosphere on the election day was relatively peaceful. but at this tense largely due to the extremely late arrivals of some ballot papers, but also due to the behavior of party activists who place desks in the premises of the polling stations to make names to take names of the citizens at the entrance and the exit of the polling stations. In a number of cases, polling stations opened dramatically late, while some having to close down again shortly after due to lack of ballot paper. This problem occurred frequently in urban areas, while rural areas had received sufficient amount of ballot papers. The conditions for people waiting in the line to fulfill their civic duties for many hours were quite dire, given heat and lack of shade or water. We also experienced rising frustrations of many voters. While waiting to cast their vote, they found out that their relatives in the rural areas had already voted. We observed that when tents were used as polling stations, it made voting more difficult and challenging for both staff and voters. Voters were still waiting to vote until late at night, and they were highly frustrated, complaining about the disorganized nature of the elections. Better preparation of the election day by the Electoral Commission could have contributed to reducing many problems and reciting tensions. This being said, we would like to extend our sincere thanks to the thousands of Zimbabweans who worked as polling station staff. They did their best to ensure that the proceeding ran as smoothly as possible. Above all, on behalf of all the team, I would like to express our admiration for the civic spirit and the democratic aspirations shown by the people of Zimbabwe, who went to vote and were ready to spend an entire day and maybe also an entire night waiting in line to fulfill their civic duties. The presence of political agents in the polling station is also considered quite constructive. I would now like to refer on the post-electoral period. Moreover, clear and conclusive result must be announced within the electoral deadline, ensuring transparency, traceability of counting will strengthen confidence in this step. This is critical, and SEC should be fully transparent in the tabulation and publication of results. Any dispute regarding the electoral process should be addressed peacefully according to the established legal procedure. And it is also crucial that the judiciary shall perform its constitutional duties in an independent, impartial manner. And finally, I would like to underline that the European Union, including the European Parliament, stands ready to support a reform process in Zimbabwe. A reform process which is inclusive and democratic and works to ensure a stable and prosperous future for all its citizens. And in this respect, we are available to provide our assistance to ensure the best possible implementation of the EU-EUN recommendations. Thank you for your attention.
I open now the floor for questions. Please introduce yourself.
Having listened to your findings, what then is the conclusion? Are we in a position to make that conclusion now, since this is a preliminary statement? But the question is it a fair and free and credible election as far as you're concerned?
I would say we do one by one.
Thank you very much for your question. First of all, let me remind something very important. This is not in the mandate of our mission to do a certification of elections. What is our mandate, what is our commitment, is to observe, the elections and the whole electoral process, including the pre-electoral and the post-electoral one. That's why we deployed also long-term observers in the country. And of course, to check if the way in which elections are held and managed comply with regional and international standards. And in that regard, I think that our statement in this preliminary statement and also my words previously have been quite clear. Unfortunately, what we observed in the remark is that in many significant and fundamental aspects, those elections fell short in the respect of those regional and international standards. Of course, in 2 months, around more or less 2 months, we will also publish a final report that will analyze in detail the phases that we already observed, but also the following one that are still pending, notably the tabulation and notably also an announcement of the results and all the post-electoral phases, eventual also legal grievance that could be also raised by the stakeholders involved. And in that capacity, in that report, we also propose some recommendations that we will submit to the competent national authorities, hoping that it could be helpful and could foster also a political debate within the country. And in that regard, I share what my friend Andreas Schieder just said, that there will be a possibility for inclusive, democratic, transparent reform, and if that will be the wish and the will of the political authorities of the country, European Union will be ready to assist in that regard and to do technical assistance. Thank you.
Next question. I don't see. Okay, yes, please, back there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, Umberto Bacchi from Agence France Presse. Given what you have observed, do you have any confidence that the results to be announced will accurately reflect the will of the Zimbabwean people?
Let me say that an electoral observation mission should not try to forecast the future. We are here to observe what will happen, and therefore, in our preliminary statement, we underlined those aspects of the procedure in which we feel that the competent bodies and ZEC notably were not fully respecting the provisions of the internal legal order, but we do not want to make any kind of provision. We will just see what will happen, and we will see if the actions and all the next steps of the procedure will comply or not with the regional and international standards, and of course with the national legal framework that is applicable to the next stage of the procedure. Thank you.
Do I see more questions? Please raise your, yes, all the way in the back, please.
My question is, your preliminary report all but condemns this plebiscite and effectively creates a context for a contestation around the result. And references will be made to this preliminary report, although you say you come after 2 months. 2 months is a long way off. So much will have happened on the basis of this preliminary report. What do you think should happen? Because you've all but condemned the plebiscite.
I'm sorry, but we are not do any kind of condemnation here. We are just reporting what our observers have seen and heard all across the country. I'm speaking about 150 extremely professional and experienced observers with many missions on their back. And on the basis of these data, not second-hand, not rumors, but objective data that has been reported by our people on the ground, we drafted an accurate analysis with what the situation is.
It is on the basis of that analysis that I'm asking
And
the summary of it is that these elections are not credible, so the outcome will be contested.
the summary of these gentlemen are that there are significant parts of the procedure that were not respecting the international principles. Of course, I do reiterate the fact that we still have to observe the final phases that are still ongoing. You are aware of the fact that some police stations just end up their operational votes early this morning. I mean, there was a significant postponement on many polling stations all across the country. And of course, we do reiterate the hope that any kind of grievance, any kind of appeal, any kind of contestation will be done in the legal framework foreseen and without any kind of violence. This is, of course, the hope of the Electoral Observation Mission. And at this stage, we cannot do any other additional remark exactly because the procedure is still ongoing.
Okay. So yes, we have a question back there.
Thank you. My name is Monica Cheru. I'm in Zimbabwe now. I would like to ask if the EU is not self-contradicting. On one hand, you are talking about where ZEC and other stakeholders have failed to fulfill their mandates based on the Zimbabwean law and constitution. And then in the same breath, you are challenging laws that were constitutionally passed in Zimbabwe. I don't know, does that make sense? Like the POV and the whatever, the acts that you spoke about. Those were constitutionally passed in Zimbabwe. Are you not choosing to play with the constitution when it suits you?
Well, I'm a bit surprised of your comments. Let me say why. We do fully respect the sovereignty and the independence of Zimbabwe, but when it's up, of course, to manage an electoral observation mission, we should also see how the internal legal framework comply or do not comply with the international standards that are relevant. And in that case, not simply us, but a very significant number of stakeholders that were in touch with us, that we met, they were denouncing and sharing with us their deep concern about the fact that the so-called Patriotic Act reduced the space of our public debate. They felt somehow a certain environment of fear and tension, and some of them, they were even afraid to meet us, exactly because they didn't want to face the risk of legal consequence of this. And of course, we would have not fulfilled our mandate if we would not have reported what has been shared by us and what has been observed by our observers in that regard, also comparing with the previous legal framework. That's the element we would simply underline, and I do repeat that every analysis is based on objective elements and is based on a clear comparison with the regional and international standards. Thank you.
We have a question here in the back, and then the lady in the pink hat.
Thank you so much. My name is Pamashima Kofa from Sources Media. If I got you right, you indicated that the Zimbabwean courts are not that so if I got you correct, you indicated that the Zimbabwean courts, the legal system in Zimbabwe is not that independent. And also, some of the observations indicated that the legal system in Zimbabwe is not that independent. And here you are saying if there is any contestation, people should go the legal route. Do you think that they go the legal route, Zimbabweans are going to get the intended result? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to stress what I did say in my speech, that I said that the stakeholders, the participating person we met, express their doubt and concerns about the trust they do have in the judicial system. This is not our evaluation, this is the evaluation of the person we met. And they felt that the fact that many legal cases also were concerning those elections in terms of the candidacy has not been solved before the elections, also didn't give a contribution in that trust. That's what they share with us when we have our meetings, and I would like to remind you that there were a very significant number of meetings, 1,600 all around the country. So I think that gave us a good basis of data to assess in that regard. And of course now we will observe very carefully that judicial dimension eventually, if there will be, of course, appeals or cases of a judicial challenge part of the procedure, and where people are constantly present in the courts, following each one of those procedures, as well as still today present, following also the case of the arrest of the around 40 persons from ZESN and ERC, and they will observe with a lot of attention, of course, all the following parts of their cases.
Thank you. My name is Rumbenzai Chizarura, and I'm a freelance journalist. You noted that female participation in politics in Zimbabwe was a bit on the low. Are there any reasons that you managed to observe to why there's low participation from women? Thank you.
Thank you, madam. In fact, when we met many stakeholders from civil society, but also some parties, they expressed a certain doubt about the reform on quotas. Because if on one side they introduce formally quotas that are fixed by the law within the National Assembly, on the other hand, it seems statistically that if you look at the candidate in the ordinary constituency, we have less women candidates than 5 years ago. Then somehow there was the impression that this system could have cut off ties between the electors and the elected. This is something that many of them shared with us. Of course, I think that these statistics are not positive, because we do truly believe that the participation of women in politics as candidates and in general in the political life of the country is a pillar, really one of the fundamental aspects of a healthy democracy. And we hope that in general there will be in the future very important debate within the country in thinking what could be the possible best reform and means to ensure that this participation will go up instead of decreasing as it happened to this election. Thank you.
Did we have a question in the middle? Okay. No, if not, then the gentleman. Yes. Yeah, she's coming next. First, the gentleman here, and then the lady in the back.
My name is Marshall. I'm a freelance journalist. In my humble understanding, when you have an observation, you have findings, then you make recommendations. But in your findings, you do not explicitly state if elections were free, fair, and credible. And given that reality, why should Zimbabweans from all walks of life take your recommendations seriously if you do not state your position concerning observation on these elections? Thank you.
I think I already answered to this question, but I will try to explain even better. I do repeat that no electoral observation mission, not the one from the European Union, not the one from our African friends and counterparts like the African Union or SADC or the other partners like Commonwealth or Carter Center, none of us is entitled by methodology to give a certification on the validity, on the fairness, on the freedom of elections. This is against our methodology. The methodology foreseen, of course, to have observers all across the country to collect as many data as possible in a coherent way, and then after that, of course, to try to see if the part of the procedure are complying or not with the standards. And we have been very clear. We told you positive aspect that yourself, for example, that generally these elections were calm, but we also had to underline the aspects in which the procedures fell short from what it was foreseen by the regional and international standards to which Zimbabwe is adhering. Therefore, I think that with this element, each one of you can formulate its own judgment, but our analysis is crystal clear, and I think that having taken account all the different parts of the procedure, having taken account the legal framework as well, the media environment, having taken account the election day, but also the campaign phases, we have done quite a substantial work with very solid ground, and I'm also happy to see that in general, taking also into account the meetings we had with the other missions and also the public statement, I can see that there is a certain agreement in many aspects of that has been problematic on the procedure. So I think that is strengthening, of course, once more the genuinity and the good job that's been delivered by the mission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Yvonne Muchaka. I am a freelance journalist. My question to you is that after you produce your report, and given that institutions like ZEC refuse to meet with you, do you see any of them taking on your recommendations and improving the state of the elections in Zimbabwe? Thank you.
I really hope so, in the sense that, of course, for a mission that has tried to do always its best in terms of professionality, in terms of engagement, it is important, and it is, of course, a matter of also really hope for the future of the country, for this vibrant, strong democratic participation of the people, to see that there will be a will to engage in a reflection. Of course, I would like to reiterate that this is a free choice of the Zimbabwean authorities. We are just providing elements or reflections coming from our analysis, coming from the international standards, to ensure that there will be the possibility for them to enrich the national political debate in that regard. But then it must be a political will of the new government, a political will of the new presidents, and of course a political will at the technical level of ZEC to engage or not. As I told you before, we deeply regret that so far we didn't see the cooperation we expected from those national bodies and from ZEC. And I think that that was really unexpected and sad, taking into account that we have been officially invited by the government, and we already provide as European Union a very significant, important technical and financial assistance. But nevertheless, we are still positive and confident, and we hope that, of course, to see progresses also in that relationship, and eventually, of course, we really hope and we'll do our best to ensure that the final report will give a rich set of fruitful and interesting recommendation, and if there will be the will to engage from our side, there will be the maximum support and will to give our personal contribution in that regard.
So we have time for one more question. It's the gentleman in the white shirt.
Hello. Yes, my name is Andrew. I'm a local observer. I just wanted to find out, would you not say that the 2023 elections are better than the previous in terms of the malpractice and the violence, etc. And also, what are the positive or plausible things that you can say that happened in this election which it did not happen before? Or what you would say that perhaps the EU, OM, and the other international standards met those standards? What are those that are positive? Because for now, what we have heard is at the negative part of the side. What about the positives that meet the international standards and also meet the EU OM observer target? Thank you.
Thank you very much. As per our methodology, normally we do not do comparisons with the previous elections. This is part also of the methodology that we are doing, in the sense that every election has its context, political, as environment, but as you have remarked, in some parts, of course, we explained where we have felt that somehow there was a certain regression in terms of political space of debate, in terms of political freedoms, in terms of right of assembly, for example, in terms of the way in which the procedure was applied. I would like to say in that regard that I would also do positive remarks. I underline many times that in general, the environment that our observers found on the ground was calm. They felt they were experiencing sometimes tensions, but not several episodes of violence, for example. That's what we underlined. And this we underlined that in general, the assessment from a large part of the police station was positive, but also we had the cases of those police stations that has been significantly delayed, in some cases even almost 1 day later. And of course, in those cases, they also experienced a certain level of tensions, frustrations from the people that they had to wait so many hours, in some cases even one whole day and not one night, to exercise the right of vote. So I would say also that I could add to these remarks that the secrecy of the vote is also something that generally was ensured, and there were positive remarks by our observers in that regard. But of course, as we do say and comment and somehow underline those positive aspects, we will not deny the critical parts that I have extensively already explained. So this is all done in a spirit of very objective analysis based on data. Thank you.
Thank you very much for attending this press conference. I close this press conference now. You will find the preliminary statement, the press release, and the fact sheet at the entrance. You will see us again in about 2 months with the next press conference when we present our final report. Thank you very much.